On behalf of the Zimbabwe National Elders Forum, and on behalf of myself, I'm humbled by your response to our call to gather on this 16th day of November 2018 for this historic event. It is historic that after 18 years under the yoke of sanctions, the National Elders Forum and the FANA is called concerned citizens or concerned church or concerned Christians to find a way out of this bedeviling monster in our time in the name of sanctions. As National Elders Forum and FANA, we appreciate your response to our call. I therefore make a clarion call to this august gathering, to sift through the deliberations of the day with a clear view of finding a way to engage all those concerned in order to remove the sanctions which have rained havoc on the common people of our beloved nation. Presenters are going to highlight how these sanctions have impacted our common people. Once we are convinced, we therefore have a responsibility to convince our constituencies, the citizenry, political parties, civic society organizations, Africa, the West, and the entire world that sanctions must be removed forthwith. This call must be born from a united people of Zimbabwe who have suffered the bondage of these sanctions. Together, we need to make a clarion call against sanctions. Remember, together we stand, divided we fall. As Zimbabweans, let us make a united, loud, and a clear call against sanctions. At the end of this convention, we look forward to the creation of task teams in every ward, district, and province to inform and educate the citizenry on the impact of sanctions, with the view to unite our call against sanctions as Zimbabweans. Therefore, this gathering does not in any way represent any political party. It does not represent any political party. Neither, let me just be clear, we are not even representing the government. We are representing churches. Therefore, this gathering does not in any way represent any political party, but it is a voice of the common people led by Zimbabweans, National Elders Forum, and FANA. Once again, as the chairman of National Elders Forum, I thank you for coming. I wish you the best during the deliberations. Even so, as you leave and join your families at the end of the day, we pray that as we have started to roll the ball today, you will remain active, participative, and deeply involved in all our future activities that are aimed at ensuring the removal of the sanctions burden. I thank you. Siyabonga. Tino Tenda.
All the dignitaries vandisina kutaura namazita tinokukudzai nokuva penyu pano navamwe vauya vakamirira mapolitical parties nemamwe mapato akamirirwa nevepress vari panowo. Tinotenda kuti mauya kuti mutibatsire kushambadza shoko irero. Saka vese vanokudzikana ngativaomberere maoko. Chokutanga initiative iyi, it's a bit of a mouthful, but sekataudzwa na Reverend Mapfumo pakutanga, those who want to work for peace must organize as well, or even better than those who want to work for war. Isitula kushandira rugare. Ndinotenda kuti initiative iyi chinhu chakaunzwa mumwoyo yedu nemwoyo wamaranda waMwari nemhaka yekuti Mwari anoda kuchishandisa, asi tofana kuchikasta in a way yokuti nyika inotinzwisisa nokutinzwa. Saka ndoda kuti senge tiri muchikoro timboripita mashoko awa ezita reinitiative yedu. Tese ngatiti the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative. One more time, let's say the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative. For short, we'll call it Zusri. In the abbreviation, ndio brand ya tichafamba nayo worldwide tichi itawo kuti tiite initiative yokuti ma sanctions abviswe. Ndichingotanga nokutsanangura meaning ye initiative iyoyi ndisati ndapinda mu zvimwe zvose zvakanyorwa nechirungu zviri panapa. Pane shoko rakanzi unity iro ririmo muimosho yakuti pakataka kutaurwa nyaya iyi pataisa misoro yedu pamwe chete savafundisi navamwe vakuru kuti toita sei, takaona kuti chimwe chinhu chiri very fundamental kuti pagone kuti masanctions aende uye kuti nyika ende forward unity pakati pavanhu vedu, zvikuru sei mapoliticians. Saka kunyange vakasiyana maopinions avo nezvavanofunga namaapproachero avanoita zvinhu hazvisi zvitsva kuti vanhu vepolitics vanosiyana mafungiro, ndomhaka vachidzi madifferent political parties. Asi kachida kuti nyika iende mberi zvinokosha kuti takasiyana mafungiro iwawo ngatifunge senyika norudzi rumwe chete, tiende mberi takabatana. Nyangwe vane zvidungurira nezvavanorwadziwa ndizvo hazvo, asi pane nguva yakuti tiende mberi takabatana tikugona kuti tivake rudzi, zvimwe tozozvionera mberi tiri tese, hakuna kwatinoenda. Amen. Saka tachida kuti church navakuru venyika, maelders nemimose navano mapato enyu nekumachechi nekumwe titaure shoko reunity iri riri very important. Kana tikataura navakuru vedu vematongerwo enyika mumabata akasiyana siyana vakataura renzwi rimwe chete kuti masanctions ngaaende, zvinokasira. Ndomhaka shoko rokuti unity riripo. Initiative haigumiri kungoshauta chete kuti bvisai masanctions, inodanawo kwatiri kuti ngatibatane. Sanctions takashandisa shoko rokuti relief initiative. Chikonzero takashandisa shoko rokuti relief inoreva kuti tizorodzewo, tisunungurewo. Sechechi hatisi vanhu vanoshandisa makano namapfumo, hatisi vanhu vehasha. Zvatiri kutaura kumarudzi awo akaita sana Britain nana America, nana Canada, nana Australia, nana European Union, vakatisa sanctions, marudzi makuru chose wawo. Asi tiri kutaura savanhu vaMwari, varanda vaMwari, tichiti aiwa katakamirira vanhu. Tinokumbira kuti masimba enyu awashandisai zvakanaka. Musunungure vanhu pane zvamuri kuvarwadzisa nawo. Ndomakati chiti ngaive relief, ngakuve kuzorodzwa. Initiative zvichireva kuti tisu tinofanira kuita take this matter forward. Mwari pachake hapana chaakagona kuita munyika apedza kuisika, apedza kusika munhu. Kana Mwari oda kuita chinhu unoshandisa munhu. Pakashayikwa munhu unotaura kana kuti unoita chimwe chinhu. Zvinazvo hazvifambiri mberi. Handiti munondizwa nyange pasina microphone. Okay, I will try to shout kana yaramba ichinesa microphone. Mwari unoshandisa munhu nemhaka yekuti Mwari unoshandisa vanhu. Initiative zvoreva kuti nyaya iyi tisu tofanira kutoipusha, kwete muZimbabwe chete asi munyika yose. Ndo kungotsanangura meaning zita rakapuwa initiative ino. It is my singular honor this morning to welcome you to the inaugural meeting of the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative. Ngati yomberere relief initiative yedu. As the National Elders Forum, in partnership with the Faith for the Nation campaign, and the Faith for the Nation campaign, I explain also, is the church's platform for godly, positive, compassionate, and patriotic nation building. We have gathered together today. Thank you. We have gathered together today to respond with obedience to what we recognize to be a compelling instruction from the Lord. Isaiah 58, verse 6. Undo the heavy burdens. Let the oppressed go free and break every yoke. This is a scripture which we all know concerning our fasting and our praying, but the Lord says it means nothing to simply keep crying and praying and fasting unless we rise up as the church and play a part in removing heavy burdens from people, in working that the oppressed may go free, and in breaking the yokes that are yoking our people. So indeed, this is what the different kinds of sanctions which were imposed by Western powers at the behest of the United Kingdom on Zimbabwe and on some of its leaders and businesses. This is what these sanctions are. They are actually a yoke and a burden upon poor people in our nation. And these sanctions were most painfully aggravated by the United States Congress Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act. The abbreviation is very appropriate. It is called ZIDERA. But me, I give it my Shona version, ZIDERA, hallelujah. Because I feel this was not a very courageous way of dealing with this situation, not very useful way. But ZIDERA, briefly, I'm sure it will be explained by our people also as they go through this, their part of addressing you, is the one that gives serious bite to functions, because a senator in the United States called Mike Flynn and others worked so that there could be a law passed in America that Zimbabwe would not get any loans, would not get any credit lines from the most important financial institutions, the the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, IMF, without the approval of the American government, and the American government contributes most of the money. So for years, even if the IMF or any other people wanted to forward credit lines and money, they couldn't do it until the Americans tell them, well, this is a fit nation to give that money. So that is what that act is, and that is why it is the root of the biting of sanctions, because it causes the world not to be able to help Zimbabwe with finance, and without finance you cannot have proper industries, do proper business, and as you can see, even right now, even currency or money or cash and everything is not there. It's partly caused by that situation. But these sanctions are an unjust, heavy burden, yoke, an instrument of impoverishment, oppression and suffering, mainly upon the innocent poor people of Zimbabwe. The nation's poor have borne this yoke of sanctions for the best part of 2 decades. It's going close to 20 years. And what this has amounted to is a sustained economic poison chalice consisting of starvation of loans, vital lines of credit, flight of capital, closure of meaningful businesses and industries, departure of helpful non-government and other organizations, lack of vital foreign currency, as well as a sustained pariah state deterrence to foreign direct investments. Just to explain that mouthful, I think I have briefly explained how money, which is the lifeline to business and employment, has been blocked from Zimbabwe by sanctions. And this has continued to poison the economy and result in all the suffering that it has actually caused. I want to even explain that most of the time we are told that the nation is poor because of corruption. The nation is poor because of corruption. The church detests corruption. We agree that corruption must be fought and cleaned out of the nation. But corruption is not the basic cause of Zimbabwe's financial problems. Corruption is everywhere. There is no nation without corruption. The Americans are corrupt, the British are corrupt, but many nations are corrupt, but they've got access to finance to be able to do their industries and other things. So the difference that sanctions makes is that they actually cut at the root so that you cannot build your nation economically. So let's not be hoodwinked to think that the entire problem that we have in this nation economically is because politicians are failing or because people are corrupt. We have a problem that has gone for nearly 20 years, which has distinguished Zimbabwe as a nation which has lived, unlike most nations on the face of the earth, without injection of the foreign money that is needed. And the main cause of that is sanctions. So the most direct and devastating effect of these sanctions has thus been catastrophic unemployment levels, poverty, extreme damage to health and other services, and a general crippling economic stagnation, all of which have burdened and oppressed the poor, while having little or no effect on the political class at which they are purportedly aimed. It is these hardships that have led millions of ordinary Zimbabweans to economic flight into a worldwide diaspora, with crippling effects both on families, on communities, as well as undesirable pressures, particularly on neighboring fellow African countries, which are already challenged with the task of fending for their own citizens. Needless to say, both at home through poverty and deprivation, and abroad through recurrent xenophobia. We know the pictures of the suffering when, because of shared poverty, our people go into the next nation to share already existing poverty with people there, and when two hungry people sit together, they end up fighting. And they give it long names like xenophobia. But this exodus also is very much due to the work of sanctions upon the nation. So, both at home through poverty and deprivation, and abroad through recurrent xenophobia, there is death for our people in this sanctions pot. The above is but a brief mention of facts which have been elaborated in various studies and which can be proven that suffering has come to this nation innocent because of sanctions. My lords bishops, national elders, stakeholders who are present here, we are gathered here as like-minded people to launch the long overdue Zimbabwe unity and sanctions relief initiative. And if you will allow me to be your school teacher again, can we say our brand after me? Let's say Zimbabwe, unity and sanctions relief initiative. This simply means we're asking every one of us here and the constituencies you lead or the churches and other bodies that you lead and everybody you meet in the street. Let us work to be those who initiate a voice that works for unity and peace, both in our politics and nation, but also calls that these sanctions may be removed. The main mission of this God-given and God-driven compassionate initiative is to spearhead a determined campaign to lobby and to appeal to the Western powers who are the force behind these sanctions to withdraw these inhumane measures which are putting a purposeless yet destructive burden on the poor people of our nation. You can, and this I say to the sanctioners, you can, in the new political climate which is rising in Zimbabwe, find more imaginative, humane, and effective ways of speaking whatever message you may see fit into our political playing field. People want to disagree about this, but our nation is changing. Sometimes I have despaired when I've seen the level at which Zimbabweans are scolding. They are scolding their leaders, they are scolding this. But I realized later that there were days when they couldn't scold. The very fact that they can now scold the way they are scolding shows you that the nation is changing. It shows you that there is freedom to speak and to intervene. And surely the sanctioners should also recognize that there are more humane ways of trying to school our politicians than to brutally lean on the poor with sanctions. In this changing climate, we plead loudly and passionately with President Donald Trump, and we plead with American legislators, unburden our struggling people. Unburden our struggling people. Withdraw unconditionally all sanctions and repeal the cruel Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act. Zidera. It is really a cruel legislation. We plead with Prime Minister Theresa May of the UK, its government and parliamentarians, as well as with the European Union, nations also like Australia and Canada, the Western nations, with a hand in these sanctions. Remove this yoke of sanctions from the neck of our poor, struggling people. Give us room to rebuild our nation and our economy. We want to say to these Western nations, you are predominantly Christian nations. You are accountable to God. You are the ones who brought this God to us and his compassion. And if this injustice continues, if you continue it, you will one day hear the voice of Christ saying to you in judgment, I was hungry and you starved me further. This is the only thing that God can say on behalf of the poor. This is the only voice which the Western nations can hear in judgment. It is the Lord simply saying, you came to hungry people, you removed the few crumbs that were in front of them. You made them suffer further. So if this continues, even the day of judgment will speak against you. The Lord will say to you, I was hungry, you starved me further. You took away the few crumbs that were before me. It is time to recognize these sanctions for what they really are. They amount to nothing but an economic atrocity on the poor. A weaponization of bread and butter against the innocent. The Western nations talk about weapons of mass destruction. The worst weapon of mass destruction is poverty. And when you contribute to poverty in any way, you are causing destruction. And this is a weapon you can so easily take out with the stroke of a pen, with a signature. And the poverty which has been inflicted on Zimbabwe can be taken away. Very little perception is needed in order to see that sanctions have done nothing all these 2 decades to hurt or sway the political class whom they are purported to school. Instead, they have steadily increased the agony of the poor and the disadvantaged. And it is simply time for sanctions to go. They are not good for purpose. They are not good for purpose. Then, through the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative, and I beg your patience as you learn this difficult sentence again. Let's say Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative, Zusri. So secondly, through the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative, Zusri, we are calling upon the entire political class in Zimbabwe, that is all our politicians and all our political leaders, to unite in calling with one voice for the withdrawals of all forms of sanctions on our nation. We in fact challenge all political parties and politicians to be openly signatories of the Zimbabwe Sanctions Relief Petition, which we are launching today. This is also why, as the churches and the elders and other stakeholders that are coming together, we feel that this initiative is non-political. It is not an initiative done by a particular party. It is an initiative for our people. Sanctions are hurting our people. And anyone who purports to represent our people should be against sanctions. And it is important to call for their removal. We note with deep concern the increasing political polarization of our nation. We take this opportunity to appeal to all political players in our nation to allow the nation to move forward by adopting a patriotic stance of unity in diversity. Notwithstanding this appeal for unity, we are at pains to point out to all our politicians that political differences and even hostilities are not unique to Zimbabwe. Even the nations from which we are begging for sanctions to school one another, those nations have got differences among their politicians. They've got differences in their political arenas which have resulted in innocent deaths from, for example, in America, they've got differences in gun laws. You know that from time to time, some American comes out with a gun and kills many people. And their lawmakers are conflicted in this life and death matter, or approaches to things like voting rights. In the UK recently, there were immigration problems where someone unearthed the fact that they were victimizing black people for years from the Caribbean through their immigration. Problems of police brutality against black people. Have we called for sanctions against those nations? Have we said their people should be made to suffer through deprivation of financial means to build the economies of their nations? No. So as the churches and the nation's elders, together with the diverse stakeholders who are partnering with us in this initiative, we call upon all our politicians and political parties to discard the call for sanctions as a weapon of domestic political leverage. There are better ways to play politics in our country. There are more imaginative ways than calling for sanctions upon our own nation. And we challenge our politicians to desist from that path. We cannot change our nation or settle our disputes by cannibalizing our poor and by economically suicide bombing our own nation. History and God will judge us severely if this continues. Let us join together to call for unconditional withdrawal of sanctions and for the repeal of ZIDERA. The Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative does not proceed from a political or partisan perspective, but from compassion for our people. Let all our politicians rather return to the drawing board and find more noble strategies for political contestation. When we are saying this gathering, as you heard Chairman Mkonoengwe say to you, is not based on any partisanship. Let me go to say very clearly, we invited every political party to have an observer in this meeting and to carry what we are saying to their parties. We gave them official invitations to do so. And those, if they have been able or not able to come, let them even hear from the reports of this. We need a reaction from every party. Where do you stand on sanctions? The church is saying to you, join us. This is no longer a political matter. This is a matter of the survival of our people. Join us in calling for the repeal of sanctions. Sign our sanctions relief petition and say your party is against sanctions. The church is calling on you to do so. So the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative does not proceed from a political or partisan perspective, but from compassion for our people. Let all our politicians rather return to the drawing board and find more noble strategies for political contestation. We are commissioning an interactive Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative website. Again, let me say Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative, Zusri. We are commissioning an interactive Zusri website. We will inform you by mail, as we have done to invite you, how you can access that website, through which people worldwide can electronically sign the Zimbabwe Sanctions Relief Petition. We are also aware that many individuals and organizations in foreign nations, especially in the Western nations that have sanctioned Zimbabwe, desire to join their voices with ours in calling for the unconditional removal of all types of sanctions against Zimbabwe and for the repeal of SIDERA. So we also want to say, as we make this call, it is not just for us and our people who are at home. It is of our people who are in the diaspora. It is also for people in the sanctioning nations who must help us also to speak to their governments, just like they did during the anti-apartheid movement, to say to their government, stop oppressing the poor, so that this can be taken away. And those people out there cannot help us if we ourselves are quiet. We have to shout help. And the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative is a cry from Zimbabweans for help. It is for us to actually say to those Western nations, you think you are helping us, but you are not helping us. We do not support that kind of help. We would like you to relieve us of it. We therefore invite and welcome everybody to sign the Zimbabwe Sanctions Relief Petition. In your files, I believe, which you have received, there is a page for you yourself to actually sign that petition for yourself. And we have also provided you with a template which you can take back to your churches and photocopy as much as you like, and to any groupings, and get us as many signatures as you can, because in due course we want to go with at least 1 million signatures. I think we can get 1 million signatures against sanctions. And we want to put them before those nations and say, the people you think you are helping do not approve of what you are doing. So we invite and welcome you to also influence others with us to sign this petition and to use your kind offices to support and influence in any way possible the removal of sanctions. I want to end this by just simply saying to us, in the end, it is our own voice as a people that matters. We ourselves must speak. If we ourselves, the common people, do not speak and just silently suffer, it will not be known that that suffering is there. In Shona, tinoti mwana asingachemi unofira umbereko. One of the reasons why, one of the purposes of the initiative of Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative is to educate, to make people know that sanctions are bad and how they are bad, is because our people are being bitten by a scorpion they cannot see. Most of our people do not actually understand what is affecting them. And it is because there's no conscientization, and would like them to be able to speak into this issue. So we ask you to help us in educating and in making our people's voice speak. Because in the end, when you really think of it, with the help of God, it is when our people rise up and speak that things can change. God can bring events. God can bring events which can make this small voice. I wanted to remind you, those who think and look at us today and say, what are these people doing? Where is their power and their strength? Our strength is in the Lord. That's the way it is. And even if we were few, with the Lord will do wonders. I remind you, one of my favorite chapters in the Bible was when 4 lepers sitting outside the city of Samaria. And the city of Samaria was under Syrian sanctions. Hallelujah. And those 4 lepers saying, why do we sit here until we die? Let us march on the Syrians. And God joined them. They could have been mocked, but they saved the day. And I want to assure you this initiative is going far. We are going to work, and we ask you to help us to work. We are going to make a very big noise about sanctions, not only in our nations, but worldwide. And in doing that, it will be a divine cause. So, I therefore now commend you to these able people who have given their time to contribute to this subject and to give us also a deeper understanding of the sanctions on Zimbabwe, including Zidera, and how they harm our nation's poor and the necessity for the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative. It is our desire that each and every person who learns about Zusri may take ownership of this noble initiative and help us to unburden our struggling nation. We have faith for the nation. Thank you, and God bless you.
Gentlemen, and I believe we have representatives of different political parties. Thank you for coming. I will be brief because most of the issues largely have been covered by our senior brother. I'm just going to take a few issues to give some of the basic backgrounds. I would like to call the issue the birth pangs of Zimbabwe. Marwadzo enyika yeZimbabwe. When we look at the Zimbabwe Unity and Sanctions Relief Initiative, tiri marwadzo. I would like to take a little leaf to say beside the 18 years of Zidera, we should not as a country forget that we had had 15 years of international sanctions under the UDI, Unilateral Declaration of Independence. So if you put those who can still count without tweeting, 15 plus 18 is equal 33. So of the 37, 38 years of independence, 33 years of those have been spent on international sanctions. That is, ladies and gentlemen, very serious. It's a whole lifetime, over 3 decades of international sanctions. So those who are 3 years have not known what it means to live in a country where the economy ticks well in terms of the health standards, in terms of the roads, railways, transport, educational system, employment, and what have you. That is how serious the matter is. So it's not only 20 years, it's not only 18 years, it's 33 years of international sanctions. So, for us, ladies and gentlemen, this is a moral issue, in my view. Moral issue because we have a life to live. The millions of Zimbabweans who have lived and died these last 33 years have lived and died without knowing what it means to live in a country where, in a world whereby there is sufficient bread and butter, going to a hospital and you have enough drugs, sending your children to school without problems, and going to a school of your own choice, choosing a hospital of your own choice, driving into those of us of a certain years The roads in Zimbabwe were enviable. Today, you drive in a road in Zimbabwe, it's by accident to be in a road you drive for 5 or 10 minutes without a pothole. A certain age takes it for granted that there are more potholes than roads. It's taken for granted today that government schools are hardly functional. If they're functional, they're accountable. Why? Because there is very little money which can come by. The Bretton Woods and all the other functions where monies are supposed to come, which government can borrow money. Borrowing is the way governments survive on. And nowhere government have been borrowing. And we take for granted that private schools and church-run schools, where 14, 16 million people have to depend on, as if it's a normal thing. It is not normal. It is abnormal. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to say is, where did it all begin? I just want to give a little part of the summary that from 1893, after 1890, we know Zusri Roads people came 1890. The first 3 years, the fights were here and there. But from 1893, when the pioneer column realized that the mining was giving them very little, Zusri Roads, according to facts, had almost a mutiny in his hands. And the guys said, you told us there is gold in this country. And look at this. Is this the only gold we have? And he was very smart. And he says, yes, I promised you gold, but I didn't promise you how much. So they realized they'd lost. Then, when he realized that they were at a loss, he says, I did not only promise you gold, I also promised you land. So, because you're unhappy with the amount of gold you have, you go for land. You take as much land as you want. And maybe as you continue to farm in your land, as whatever you do, you might continue to eventually get some more gold or whatever you might get in there. And from 1893, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, members of the pioneer column started going into land. My own grandmother on the paternal side was a teenager at that time, and she used to tell me case by case, because her father was a chief. When she saw these white people, she went crying and she says, Mama, people are really wild. They have skinned people alive. And they are walking. And she says, the mother says, no, it's their color. Then 3 days later, those people come, and the father says, you see these people, these are our visitors. They want to go hunting. And my grandmother was the firstborn in the family. And she's told by the father, please go and show them where to go, where they can do the hunting. The left side is for the hunting of the visitors. The right side, that's for us. Then she said she had to walk in front of them. I said, but how am I going to tell them? She said, no, you can point, they can see. So she walks in front of them, and she points. Indeed, the game was there, drinking early hours in the morning. And they were there. She goes back home, says, oh, now I can see is their color. But 1 year afterwards, she sees her father and men with spears and axes and guns and said, we can fight. And she says to her mother, what's the problem? They are angry people, they are talking to my father. And the mother says, you remember those men last year you took to show them where they could go hunting. Now, they are saying they are the ones to show us where to go hunting. They are the ones now to show us where to go plowing. The land now belongs to them. I'm talking of 1893. So those who write books, when you say the Chumurenga one is 1896 to 1897, please rewrite your books. That's 1893. So the issue is the land question. So that land was taken from our ancestors, and there was no compensation. This is the same issue when it comes to November 11, 1965. Unilateral Declaration of Independence. Yes, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it sounds UDI, Unilateral Declaration. For me, when you go into the facts, it was not a unilateral declaration. In my view, it was an agreed declaration between the British government and the whites who were in Southern Rhodesia. Because they were in the minority and the blacks were in the majority, and therefore there was no way they could allow them to say, now they can rule. It was an agreed, some part of the facts are, by 1963, MI5, which was operative very much in Southern Rhodesia, 1963 CIO, that's when it was started. CIO, it was not started, it was started that time, 1963, with a result to say they would start operating separately because they knew the whites were going to have a separate state. Now, those sanctions for 15 years were very hurting. And I remember 1970, Mr. Smith saying, yes, the sanctions are hurting, but I can assure you, no matter how low we go, how down we go, but we shall make sure the Africans shall be below us. End of quote. I'm saying so because it was the land question. In Lancaster House, some of us had the opportunity to be there. I was not sitting in Lancaster House. There are only 42, 45 people who sat in Lancaster House who did the actual issue. I'm not counting those who were part of the secretariat, but I'm talking of those who were actually members of the negotiation party. The clarity was the land question. The 1961 issue, which became a problem for those of you who can remember, on the land issue, was brought back in 1972, 10 years later, which was supposed to be expected to be signed by the African people, by Pierce Commission, Lord Pierce, and the Lord Pierce Commission, the Rhodesian Front members were saying, we know our Africans, they are going to sign it. And they were shocked. Lord Pierce himself went to Rusape, if I can recall, and attended a meeting where there were thousands of people. And they were there, and within 15 minutes, people had traveled on foot, on scotch carts, and by roads, and by car, in vehicles. When they were asked and they were read this 5-point plan, one of the chiefs stood up and said, I, representing my fellow chiefs here, therefore representing all the people surrounding here, we say to these issues, no, kwete aikona, bodo hach. And Lord Pierce stood up and said, I have been a politician for nearly 50 years, and this meeting took only 15 minutes, and this the shortest meeting I've ever attended in my whole life as a politician, end of quote. And it's from 1972 that the real armed struggle started. People just said, zokutaurirana zvakwana, iye zvino zvazokurwa. I'm saying so, ladies and gentlemen, to say this issue comes a long way. The 1979, the Lancaster House, the same issue, the land question, came about. Most of the issues were tackled, and the very last issue was the land question. Those who can recall, who were inside Zimbabwe, the Rhodesian security forces launched hot pursuits deep into Mozambique, hitting the guerrillas hard. And they launched deep in Zambia hard, right into Lusaka. And the two countries, President Samora Machel and Kenneth Kaunda, had to weigh in on the Patriotic Front leaders and said, please sign up the willing buyer, willing seller basis. They had to be forced on the issue. Samora Machel sent his foreign affairs minister, Joachim Chissano, accompanying President Kaunda then, to go and to talk to Patriotic Front leaders in London. And Julius Nyerere, the frontline chairman, then said to the Patriotic Front, you guys, the land issue is not a political issue, it is a constitutional issue. It is a constitutional issue, so you cannot risk Zambia and Mozambique to be scattered and riddled because of that. Sign up the issue. When you go back to Zimbabwe, in a new country, you will change the constitution to suit your issue. And 10 years they had to wait. It appeared 10 years a long time. But when 10 years arrived for Zimbabwe to change the constitution for the land issue, there was still the OAU. The OAU had to say, OAU chairman had to send an emissary to say, please, Zimbabwe, if you start dealing with the land issue in Zimbabwe, we have South Africa we are dealing with. Because of the issue, the apartheid regime will say, look what is happening up at the above the Limpopo, and this will happen also to us. They will prefer to die fighting. Therefore, please, would you, Zimbabwe, delay the land issue? I'm saying this, ladies and gentlemen, to say, for the young politicians and the young Zimbabweans, we have to understand this issue, because it's no longer the white issue today. It will be black and black tomorrow. And unless we understand where the things are coming from, we may make the same similar mistakes. But this was not a mistake. Remember, Africa paid a heavy price for us to gain our independence. So we had to pay a price by delaying the land issue in order for South Africa to be made free up to 1994. So it is only up post-1994, giving South Africa a few more years to have its first election as a free country. That's when the land issue year 2000 started. And that's when the ball game started. And we end up being faced with the Zidera. The meaning of Zidera, it sounds very innocent, as we just heard. It is Zimbabwe democracy. But the issue is nothing to do with democracy. It's to do with the land issue. Why have you dared to take the land from our own kith and kin? That was the issue. Yes, if we have to go through the facts, it is us, some of our fellow citizens, who went to UK, and the UK said, we don't have a law that will allow us. Go to United States. And some of us went to United States and asked for this Zidera. And if we talk to the Americans, they say, oh yeah, America didn't come to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe came to America, to the Americans. And I remember saying to one of my brothers, and I said, my friend, my brother, you are going to America to seek for sanctions using American soil, American money, American law, American people. We shall have this on our lives for the next 50 years. And here we are today. So we have a real problem, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, that in order to deal with these issues, sanction issues, we have to sit down and think. This is not an issue for toying, but it is an issue of thinking, planning, strategizing seriously. Ngoe pfuti yakapfura. Some of us are not fit. I don't shoot with bullets, I shoot with my brains. I would like to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that what we have just been told, that international isolation We have a standard development in Zimbabwe for the past 33 years. The economic countdown has made us feel to be in a mess. The effects in our educational system. Our schools have had the best system all over the continent, yes, but we could do much, much better. Some have a certain amount of jealousy to say Zimbabweans are hard workers and hard thinkers and we can do miracles. But unfortunately, we have allowed ourselves to be usable and used. We are usable because we are educated. And we are very user-friendly. And against ourselves and against each other. It is therefore necessary ourselves that we realize that we need an educational system which in Zimbabwe has to address our nationhood. That as a people we should be a people who can from Cape to Cairo, using Zusri Rhodes' philosophy. From Cape to Cairo, you meet a Zimbabwean, you should say, I'm a Zimbabwean. You don't say, I come from Southern Africa. As some are saying now, you said, I come from Southern Africa. But they couldn't from Southern Africa. So we should be a people who are proud to be Zimbabweans. We should be a people who should be counted, and we are countable. We should have that kind of education. It is necessary that our health system today, if you go into the hospitals, it's very easy for us to be angry at the nurses and doctors, and when we forget that the atmosphere is unfriendly for them. If they had everything they need, for those of us who travel all over the world, when you say you come from Zimbabwe, they said, you have some of the best doctors. Because when you're saying we are best with the best doctors, but the best doctors don't have all the necessary equipment and the drugs. The lack of political cohesion and the discord, we need to put that straight. The need for our industrial scientific updates will help us that tomorrow people should wake up and know I'm going to work, rather than people will sleep and don't know when to wake up because there's nothing to wake up for. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have, this is a moral issue, and it is a sacred issue to say sanctions are part and parcel of evil in Zimbabwe. I thank you.
First and foremost, this is the DERA, which is Zimbabwe Democracy and Economy Recovery Act, was signed into law in 2001 by the American government. It has provisions that seek to restrict the ability of the United States to cast its vote in support of new assistance to Zimbabwe from the international financial institutions, except for programs that meet basic human needs or promote democracy. The effects. There is the international isolation, A. B, there is failure to service international debts. C, suspension of international financial support. That is, multilateral financial institutions suspended direct, balance of payment support, development grants, project finance, and to the problem of cash. D, limited access to international lines of credit. E, movement of financial resources. These are the general effects that are brought about by ZIDERA as an act. Which are the institutions that are affected? One, education in this country is heavily affected. Two, food security. And three, the health sector. These three institutions are heavily affected by ZIDERA. Let me remind the House that those who are addressing, I start from here. You can see how big we are and how shiny we are. We are not affected. What more of the political parties? The people, the constituency, those people who are in rural areas, those people who live in Mbare, where you have a bath, when your soap is on your mouth for fear that it will be taken, are the people who are affected. That's why we are taking this issue lackadaisically. That's why we even waste our time on history, because we are not affected. Let me again remind the House that when all things were said by this act, I read it not once, not twice, they were conditions. They were conditions. These are facts. The Americans said in that piece of legislation, for us to remove this evil, diabolic law, we expect your government to do the following. A, they should be the rule of law. That's the problem when you are behind time. They start calling at the office. Anyway, these are the conditionalities that were put against our government. These are facts. One, there should be rule of law. I can't elaborate because my time is just about up. B, there was supposed to be free press. C, election and pre-election conditions, that elections must be free, fair, and credible. And D, there must be commitment to equitable, legal, and transparent land reform. What does this mean? It means those who are getting land were the big fish. That's why there is an audit today. That's why you see some of the farms belonging to unborn children. That's fact. The E, there should be broad-based and equitable economic growth. What does this mean? It means that when we are talking of the growth in our economy, it should touch from the least of our people to the highest. Today, what do we see? We see children of the big fish with 5 million United States dollars. Is that equitable? Those were the issues that were supposed to be addressed by our government. Sanctions are evil to the last. But are we also doing our part to correct the anomalies that are there? I'm not only talking of the government. I'm also talking even of the anomalies in our churches. Anomalies even in our families. Tokusaka mchiona vana baba vane matumbu makuru, vana mai vachingofamba vasina matumbu. These are facts. And as long as we are not able to look into ourselves and say, did we manage to correct these anomalies, we will continue to cry, we will continue to shout, and nothing will come our way. I'm one of the very strongest proponents of saying sanctions must go because they did not meet what they were meant to correct. You will have a list of those people, maybe. Elastom Gwade, are you there? There are names. My point is, there are names of people who have been written. But these people are too big to be affected. Their children are attending school in America, in England. So how are they affected? Actually, they go with government funding. And the taxpayer, it is the lowest person in the community who is paying for those taxes. So the first thing that we have to do is to ask our government to correct some of these anomalies. When most of these anomalies have been corrected, then we go out and say, we have done our best. Now it is left with you. I thank you.
I will just say all protocols observed. I did come with my president of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, Mr. Svelani Javangwe. He will talk a little bit more about the business, how it has been affected. But I just wanted to, firstly, I know that we are told not to praise you, but I just want to say that God gave you a function as people of God and as ministers of the gospel. You must acknowledge that God gave you people to minister to take care of, to feed their faith, and to make sure that you protect them at all costs. If you are not protecting them, step aside. Because it does not help us. The question of sanctions. In fact, let's define the word sanctions. Sanctions means penalty. Sanctions means embargo. Sanctions means that I must stop you from doing what God asked you to do for yourself. Now, when that happens, it means that there are people in this world who want to take the position of God and become other people's God. They have become idolaters who want to be worshipped by other nations. And I think for us to take that step and say they've done well in order to impose sanctions on Zimbabwe because ourselves have done something wrong, it is being unfair on ourselves and unfair to those that we've been entrusted by God to take care and minister to. I happen to be a preacher, so you can understand why. And I like to analyze things from a philosophical point of view too. You have to come from. So when someone imposes sanctions on us, that doesn't work well. And we need to be very careful. So you, as people, leaders in your own churches, these are the things that you want to look to. Don't just minister the word to a broken spirit or a broken soul. You want to make sure that that soul is activated to receive the word in a manner that will benefit it. And that's, I find that very interesting. But
But let's say, just to give you a little bit of, and it's not me who wrote it. I just want you to, it's written by a professor who is actually Cambridge University. Professor Paul Collier. In his book, he says the bottom billion. I don't know if any of you have read it. But you know, Prophet Otaona says, the problem about you, Afundi, is you don't read books. Please read books. It was a general statement. I keep it very general too. Thank you for that correction. But why sanctions in the first place? He writes himself, not me. He says, is because, and I'm talking about our continent and our country, it's because Africa has got resources, has got natural resources. And because of that natural resources, these are resources being sought after by America, by Europe, by Asia, by Australia. So Africa, not Zimbabwe only, so Africa finds itself in a position which is very complicated. So what do they do, these other continents that look at our resources? In fact, all of them are vying for resources in Africa. So what did they do? He writes, not me. He says, the Western world, they created conflict. They would come into Africa, into a country like ours, Zimbabwe. They came in, created a conflict. But creating a conflict, what they're trying to do is, they are trying to transfer their own values to you. So they look at their own values and then they come and say, your values are wrong. These values that you have imposed on your, which you are applying in your own country, are contrary to what they now call, and so I can say this. They now say to them, these are human rights. I'm sorry. In my Bible that I read, there is only one right. It's just God's right. So all other human rights to me are evil. That's all I say, because what have they done? So they bring their own values, which are anti-Christ, which are anti-biblical, and they want to come and impose them on us. And they say, all your own other things that you've been doing are all wrong. And that's how they've done it. So they create conflict within a nation. When they create conflict, then they'll come in and they say, all right, let's create another opposition party, for argument's sake. They create an opposition party. I don't know what opposition party they've created in other countries. That opposition party drives now their values into a country, and then sanctions are imposed. Then they say, because they've not adopted these, let's now impose sanctions. When they now impose sanctions, then they are pursuing their own agenda. And they make sure now the values, the resources, the natural resources that you have are moved out of the country by them for their own benefit. And you, in your own country, like our country, Zimbabwe, there are so many resources in this country. We can never call ourselves poor because God gave us so much of it, and yet we benefit nothing out of it. Right? And that's what is happening within our own scenario. Now, I came out so that I could make this very clear. I stand here as an affected businessman in this country. I run a company, I own a company, which all of you still have an imperial fridge in your homes. But I've stopped producing them. 2007, I stopped producing the domestic fridges for all of it. Because I can't do it, because of the sanctions that have come into the country. We don't have forex, we can't import. And this is reality. You need to see it from that point of view. So, brothers and sisters in Christ, let's be very careful. Let's not support things that really take what is already on our table. Or taking bread out of our mouths. And they're using the wrong things. And I also talk about the human rights in conclusion. I don't want to stay here for long. Human rights, let's be very careful. Don't bring here things that are not godly. If you go back to the Western world, the values which they call human rights, they are adopted in their country. And then the Bible says these are detestable. Chingochani chakanyorwa kunzi detestable. As chinonzi mimi imposa Zimbabwe. So you look at these things, look at it, I mean, and I'm saying you as Christians and as the head of the Christian, you are sitting back and relaxed. And you say things are all fine. What you want is my contribution and put in the plate, and then you say, I'm now well. You are poorer by taking money that is condemned. Let's just be very careful there. I wanted to say, as far as business affected, let me tell you, we will stand with you in support of lifting up the sanctions. But even if they are not lifted, let's all go out and fight them. Let's stop doing the wrong things. It is evil. Because we are only damaging ourselves. We have become so greedy. I grew up in one shot, one shirt, equals 10. Do I really need them? And that's the riches that we have. I say to you, let's all be careful. Sanctions are real. Stop blaming ourselves. We can solve our problems in this country without having to call anyone to come and impose sanctions and penalize us. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Allow me to say all protocols observed so that we can get to the business that we would like to get down to. Certainly it's an honor and a privilege for me to be addressing this delegation, because it is something that we know I had always hoped to get a chance to do, particularly relating to business and perhaps this issue. Because when you look at this issue that we are here to deal with, which is sanctions, as business, our role is to deal with problems on an ongoing basis. And most of the times, what you must, unless you start dealing with the root cause of your problem, you'll always continue facing the same problem. And in this case, as we try to run our businesses, sanctions always emerge as an impediment. And I'll explain briefly on how these sanctions are affecting us. But also, as business people in Zimbabwe, our belief is that we are all Zimbabweans, and this. But the common goal should be to protect Zimbabwe from all that is bad. This, I believe, includes sanctions. That must be a common objective. If something is bad, then it is so. The sanctions that we are currently facing, we believe they must go as business because of the impact that we are currently facing. Now, when you look at this impact of the sanctions, some have been called smart, they've been called targeted, but the impact has been wider than what is shackles. This distance that we have come, it's been with these shackles of sanctions. And we believe that if business does not perform, that is industry, especially particularly in this case, I'll make reference to industry, then the whole economy suffers. We may have congregation in our churches who are praying for jobs, but in as much as creative as our business people could be, if this issue of the root cause, one of the root causes or major root causes is not addressed, then we've got problems. Now, with the issue of sanctions, what you have is any country, whether be it targeted or whatever, that is said to be sanctions, is then stayed away from by most of the players in the global community. Because that issue of sanctions just says there is something wrong and we can't participate in this country. Be it those that want to do, we are looking for foreign direct investments to create more jobs, more factories, and more investment in our country. But what is the first thing that they look at? They look at what, when they do their analysis, their pestle, that is, it will say Zimbabwe is under sanctions. It says there are smart sanctions somewhere. But what then happens is these investors, some of them then choose to say to not to deal with Zimbabwe because you don't know which particular individual is under sanction. And the way that the data is structured, it is structured such that if you are found to be dealing with anyone who is targeted, you will be fined. I think some of you may have in the past quoted this story of I think it was one of the banks that could then go charge a lot of money. And what happened thereafter was that some of the corresponding accounts that we were working with for most of our banks were closed. It was virtually impossible for even our people in the diaspora to transfer money into Zimbabwe. And what has also happened is that sometimes, just on suspicion, when some of our members have tried to buy equipment, tried to buy raw materials, and when they are not under sanctions, their money has been captured, and some have lost money, which they are still trying to collect or collect right up to now. Just to give you an example, which is why this event or this particular approach may yield a result. When you look at what you find on the internet under Zidera, the policy status is that it is a policy that is meant to support the people of Zimbabwe in their struggle. So the issue is, to what extent is it actually supported any cause, and to what extent, that is the people of Zimbabwe, is it actually be worked against the cause of Zimbabweans to create jobs and to fight poverty? That is something that we need to consider. You find that our companies, other companies in other countries, Zambia and so forth, find it easier to access foreign financing in order to grow their businesses and to increase the investments in their businesses. You find in Zimbabwe, we've got no such access. So you really, any company that you see operating and investing, that company should be applauded. In Zimbabwe, we've got a lot of when you look at the one of the key issues, some of the key issues that we are trying to address, as I indicated, is the issue of employment, and it is only industry that can provide that employment. As you are aware, growing up, for anyone growing up, your father was working at this company, this factory, your uncle, and so forth. Some of those companies have closed, and we have not had any new companies that have opened up. Despite the fact that as a country, God has given us a gift of a lot of endowments. And what has happened is that those endowments have enriched people elsewhere, particularly even in the countries that some of them that are actually applying the sanctions on Zimbabwe. But you do not see that level of riches in the country where the materials have been sourced. And so you find that with all that God has given us, and the education that you have given to us, your children, and we are giving to our children, and the prayers that we are giving, we are all making, it is still very much harder to try and run and grow the economy from an industry perspective. We are saying we are not politicians. We are trying to run businesses and create employment. But once again, we are caught in these shackles of the sanctions, because they are affecting our ability to get finance, and also the country's ability to attract FDI, some of whom we should be partnering in our businesses in order to grow. And this has resulted in worsening socio-economic issues, and where we should be focused, where we should be ensuring that we fight poverty and we provide health care, and also we create more jobs. And one of the things that why industry should be supported, a lot of our people have identified opportunities where they can, particularly where we're an agro-based economy, where they can process, perhaps like in this case with our farmers, the agro produce that comes from our farms. But because they cannot access equipment, these opportunities remain idle. As you are aware, a lot of our farmers if people had gone on farms and they had not succeeded. But what we are now realizing is that without a functioning industry, the farming sector itself will not be successful, because it is industry that is actually a market for the agro produce. Because a lot of the agro produce is perishable, as you are aware. So what happens is, if it is not processed into other goods and commodities that have got a longer shelf life through canning or otherwise, that produce will be lost. And it is harder for a farmer who is trying to farm in Zimbabwe to try and look for a market outside of the borders. But if we have our industries that are functioning, we have found that it has started creating opportunities for our farmers. So it is important that these industries are able to keep growing, invest in the current technology by being able to access the technology and money that we are currently unable to achieve. So as Zimbabwe, as a country ranking highly in entrepreneurship, and also as a country that has got a lot of endowments, we should be one of the top economies in Africa, if not in the world. Had we not been having some of these challenges that we are currently having. So we understand where perhaps the challenges that we have, that the country has got, but we also appreciate the efforts that have been made in the recent past to address some of the key challenges that we have had relating to governance and so forth. But certainly, we believe that Zimbabwe is not the worst case when you look at it, what happens in other countries. But these countries are getting the support. So Zimbabwe certainly deserves to have some relief from these sanctions, so that we can tap into the creativity, the intellect, the experience of our people. And as I conclude, again I'll repeat that God gave us a lot of natural endowments, which we must be allowed to convert into value and create jobs and wealth for our people, so that we can make Zimbabwe a better place. Zimbabwe is endowed with a lot of, as I said, endowments, including even from a tourism perspective. We've got a lot of tourism products, including one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Victoria Falls, and it's not the only one. And all we require is for people to come and see that and leave money with us. But for as long as there are sanctions, and I'm sorry, I have to say this, so people won't go there. Why are you going there to spend money in a country with sanctions? And I do not think we are that. When I look around the room, when I walk around in Zimbabwe, we certainly deserve better, because we are people that are trying, and we will continue to try. So certainly our position as business, and we have always stated this very clearly, the sanctions must go. Thank you.
My protocols also observe ganai. Mr. Chairman say, atezvara mukono wengwe. Zvaitwa panapa nevanhu maspeakers ese aita panapa. Dai pasina kuti makandipa theme yekuti the role of the church in the removal of sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe. Zvazviri enough kuti ndandichafurira vanhu avo tiende kuchimurenga. Maspeeches apo panapa anoshatirisa. Some of you might be surprised. Why would he say that? After Form 6, ndakaenda kugweru teachers training yakunzi MSU. My first school yandakano teacher yainzi St. Albert's kucentenary Mount Darwin. Saka umwe usiku takaingwa tikaparidzirwa vhangeri yakadai. Ndobva ndatakurwa, ndobva taenda kuminda mirefu. Ende andofunga vamwe inshona mainzwa nai. Ndo ndisikati asi vamatema danda vanoziva kuti ndiri mumwe wavasi handiparticipate. Ndamufundisi wechechi. Asi futi ndine ikuona stereki. Saka zvinomboshatirisa varume ava vati no one has stereki. Asika, there is a role that the church must take. Somebody has to talk about the role of the church in the removal of sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe. So Mr. Chairman say, ini ndakanyora manditaurira kuti mkwasha ndatorovha kumusangano wanga uri kurufaro ndichatenda manheru ndavaudza ndichasvika na 6 kumasvingo uko. Ndakanyora kuti the biblical dream team yemubhaibheri of the prophet, the kings and priests to run the affairs of a territory needs a revisit. When kings who come into leadership by elections and prophets and priests who are called and appointed by God come together on one accord, it becomes a perfect kingdom partnership as well as a perfect covenant alignment. We call this the dream team of the kingdom. Nekuti church izwa izvi kutonga kuri kuita vakutonga kwaro nekufamba kuri kuita vafundisi mese nechechi Mwari havana mboti vana kutonga kwaro vanenge vari kwavo vega chechi iri kwayo yega. Kubva nakare mubhaibheri zvaifambirana. Zvenyu zvokuwanza mavende ekushanda pamwe chete izvi zvinoita kuti mutambudzike. We call this the dream team of the kingdom. This dream team must work together for the good of the kingdom. Both are anointed by God. Both the kings, the priests, and the prophets, they are anointed by God to win the battle of social transformation as well as economic prosperity. Power, protection, and wisdom result when kings, priests, and prophets come together as God intended. Unfortunately, the church has preached about going to heaven rather than ruling here on earth. We have preached the mistake here as a church. We have preached the church instead of the kingdom. You know, the church, it's a denomination. The word denominate, it means ipazita kuka gurupu kawawamba. But that does not need necessarily. Kudenga hakumbonozive wisiri garai uko. Zayo jainda yapo. EFM mira yapo. Sara vishendere zaima tamburena muri papa. Arisi denga iroro asiremba ndori nodaro. We have preached the church instead of the kingdom of God. Ndosaka machechi akawanda pasina kingdom. Because pane chechi paifanira kuve authority. And yaifanira kuve voice rekuti inzwai kare vaprofita vaikonsultiwa nemunhu ari elected in position. Ndakuda kunorwa hondo, ndiri kunokunda here, zvonzi enda hako nekuti Mwari wavaisa mumaoko ako. Saka uya king uya ari elected onorova chimurenga ka achienda achiziva kuti ndakahwina kare. Semi vaKristu kana makatendeuka munotoziva kuti makatohwina kare. Kana nyaya yemasanctions tikaoperate in the spiritual takatohwina kare kuvabvisa tisati tatotanga. Because for we walk by faith and not by sight. Saka takahwina kare. Kana yo Bible kunai Mark 11 inoti verse 24 kana muchinyengetera tendai kuti mava nazvo kuti mugova nazvo. Don't forget to operate in the spiritual. But tikada in the physical indobata AK-47 years no. Ndinogona stereki and ndikaita 10 minutes nemi munomu ndedatadza basa. But remember to operate. I will speak about other things. The divine partnership of kings and priests and prophets is only understood when we understand the order of the kingdom of God. When Jesus' preaching ministry began, his message was on the kingdom. When he started, I got the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God's message is not only about salvation and going to heaven when you die. It is also about heaven being brought to earth. Matthew 6:9-13. As you know, your kingdom come. Thy kingdom come. Ineuya kupiko pano. Dai chechi tiri panzvimbo yedu. Tisina kumazhana unge mavende ambuya. Apana zvinombotinetsa muno muZimbabwe. Ndosaka paine muchapter inoti if my people. Without the gospel of the kingdom, we have insufficient truth to overcome the enemy. The church needs wisdom from above. James 1:5, you know, if any of you lacks wisdom to guide him through a decision or a circumstance, he is to ask or of our benevolent God, who gives to everyone generously and without rebuke or blame, and it will be given to him. It's wisdom that helped. Listen, I will repeat. It's wisdom that helped Joseph bring forth the most powerful economy the world had ever seen. Munhu wechechi, munhu wesvondo, akashandura economy yenyika. Joseph anga asiri wesvondo, anga ari waMwari. Ega kungotaura kuti ende chakanakira Mwari anoyuza chaakakupa kuti chishandure nyika. Nongotangira the whole thing, and Joseph had a dream. And he made sure that dream yake nyango akatengerwa bhachi nababa, bhachi rinosara mupiti, iye achienda nedream. Bhachi rinosara mumaoko amama Potiphar, iye achienda nedream. Bhachi rinosara muprison, iye achienda nedream. Ozopfekedzwa ebheta bhachi raanozoshandura Pharaoh wacho. The church needs wisdom. It's wisdom that helped Joseph bring forth the most powerful economy the world had ever seen. It's wisdom that established Daniel to counsel the Babylonian government. Mvana mumwechete, tikasamunyangira panyaya ya Mwari wake uyu, atimbate mukomana uyu. Naiwe Daniel, andindizve, akandwa mugomba reshumba. Listen, amugone kukanda munhu of the tribe of the Lion of Judah into the tribe of lions of Game Park. Mumisa kuma shumba the national parks. Iya ine the lion of church musakanganwe mungapezera mae political party. Mungapezera mangove vamwe musakanganwe your role. Ndichataura two weapons that tinofanira kuusa. Isu vamwe ku politics takamboda kupinda kuchimureka takapfuura neko. But unofanira kutoziya role yako sewe church. Actually mune a stronger and a more powerful weapon. Because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty through what? Through God. To the pulling down of sanctions. Now sanction is stronghold here. It's a wisdom that established Daniel to counsel the Babylonian. Arimo mugomba ndokunzi naiwe Daniel. Urimo here mwana wangu zvikadzi mambo imi panze pamuri ipapo raramai nekusingaperi. Shumba dzenyu dzine zhara bva dzarya. Dzavhunduka. The church is a pressure group standing for the people as to promote good citizenship. There is need to look into reasons why sanctions were imposed on our Zimbabwe, Zataurwhite. Then lobby for the removal of those sanctions through prayer and engagement. Through prayer and engagement. Through prayer and engagement. Doma twins are not some sanctions. Prayer and engagement. Nai. In conclusion, pane yakazoti. Then the Lord appeared in 2 Chronicles 7:12-16. Magambe verenge. Akataura akat, if my people that are called by my name. Is we will continue to plead with God on behalf of the people of Zimbabwe as we pray with the determination until the Lord answers. This type of prayer would be the catalyst for the restoration and revival in the land of Zimbabwe. The Brendan Woods brothers are taurwa. Vakangoisa theory yana Andrew Gramsci. Ye hegemony. Listen. Aripo murumainzi Andrew Gramsci avamwenyu makazvidzidza amene vamwe asina kuzvidzidza hazvina ndibasa rese imi chingoziya kuti muri kunamata. Andrew Gramsci akataura pamusoro pehegemony wekuti tunyika tudiki tunongoti mazviita museya mwanda yuza mutupo wangu chete kuti musanyanya kuita muse maita henyu tumwe tunyika tuchitonge hegemony. It means chinyika chine simba chinoyuza authority yacho kuti chitonge chimwe nyika nezvimwe zvakadaro isitongo pacifier. But zvataurwa navamapfumo vataura point ye solution yanda kupedzisana. Are you ready? Everybody say this after me. Andikakundwe na teacher utaonashe. Are you ready for this? Are you ready to say it? Wamwari kunditeresa neshanje newa kumaninga ndiri kunyazotaurawo zvakanaka. Because face dzavamwe dzinovhunduka takabva kuchimurenga kare zvakapera. Everybody say, in life, there are no permanent friends, but there is permanent interests. Panpamba ndakatadza kutaura, sorry vaja vangu. Panpamba ndakatadza kutaura ndikati munofunga kuti kuwanda kwemaChina munokudiwa neChina. Permanent interests. Nekuti mabhandita ava hasevhe ikoko anonyanya kushanda kuna asingabhadharwe. Saka vaona kuti vauyiwo vakawanda. Now, 4 things. Well, zidera, the word zidera in English, you know, the correct word is zidera, ramataura. You know, derangement. The word in Chirungu. I'm on a derangement. Saka tiribuda would derange one never ne power, but I did derange. No weapon formed against us. Now 4 things. Are you ready? Yakayuzwa. Never come na okwanika. Are you ready? Ndakupeza 4 things. Yekuna ya Nimrod. Yataurwa na vamapfumo. Summarize into 4 things. Number 1, pavaka Babel paya. Kuti vave successful. Number 1, a commitment to work on a clearly defined goal. Kana kereke dutese takadaisha. If we today pama resolutions tikavene a commitment to work on a clearly defined goal. Ngativakire zita redu tribe ichi kutaura kuyako kwakataurwa. Saka let's commit ourselves to a clearly defined goal. Number 2, chakaita kuti vawine venguva ya Nimrod, unity within and among all groups and the departments. In interview lecture, I've been a lecturer for over 30 years. Ndakatanga ndiri secondary school, no teacher my Bible schools. That teacher wafundisi wanopfuura 5,000-6,000. Don't teacher in 3 different Bible colleges. One of the things yandaka discover ndechekuti mukristu chete vechindevere vakati sizomtumisa ngendlela zonke kodwa somunyewo namandla. Tingamurumbidze nenzira dzakawanda asi kereke yaMwari imwe chete. Zvinhu zvekuti ukaona maJohani washora, zvako zvekuti ukaona veJehovah's Witness washora, zvako zvekuti ukaona ukakati unenge uri shallow pa theology. Chokwadi hachigare pazita rechechi, chinogara mumwoyo wemunhu. Hapana mwoyo wakadhindwa zita rechechi. Ndizvo zvinotadzisa chechi kuti ive imwe chete. Nekuti imwe inofunga kuti iri nani kupfuura imwe. Hapana iri nani. Ari nani ndiane successful, yatinoti ultimate success. Well done, good and faithful servant. So, number 2, unity within and among all groups. Hative nekubatana. Chechi murimuno here. Chechi murimo here. Pamberi nekubatana. Andambo tisimudze chibhakera kana mbama ndangoti pamberi nekubatana. Number 3, one language. Everybody say one language. Munoziva mukataura rurimi rumwe chete muri kereke. Hamumbotadzi. Hamumbotadzi kuti tibudirire one language. Chekutanga ndate commitment to work on a clearly defined goal. Chechipiri unity within and among all denominations. Number 3, one language. Pasi nema sanction. Ngabve. And munoziva kuti ana America wacha zvireve kuti havateereri vanokunzwai. Inga pane rimwe rwiyo runoimbwa mumachechi kuti anotikwanisawo, anoda kukumbirwa. Vanosambotya kuti ndi Trump kana kuti May. Vanotone tunhama twavo tweBrexit pakupedzesera. Doing the will of God. Everybody say doing the will of God. But ana Nimrod vanga vasingaite the will of God. But the same picture unogona kuenda naye kuna Esther. Esther akaita a commitment to work on a clearly defined goal. Iminda yamunoona mata ndichanamata. Unoenda naye pa unity within and among. Pauri kunamata nevanhu Mordecai ndiri kunamata ndiri kuno. Unogona kuenda naye pa one language, they were all praying. Unogoenda naye pa doing the will of God. Rescuing the people vakanga vaiswa into disarray.
One finding I made today, I always wondered, I always bragged and say lawyers as the longest and eloquent speakers you can ever find in society. But today I think I'll go back and tell my lady friends that we have competitors in the form of preachers. They speak very well. I'm very impressed. I was called by one of the chairpersons when I was in Bulawayo with the commission which I belong to, normally known as the Land Barons Commission. This is a commission that is looking at sale of state land in and around urban areas. I can tell you that we have seen big, fat, and powerful land barons. Just look around you. If there's someone who's fat, big, and powerful, ask him, are you not a land baron? But I thank God that the president, young as we are, gave us authority to deal with those powerful, fat, and big land barons. And in that process, we came across sanctions in that process, because there we look at things like new settlements coming in, service provision by local authorities, and so forth and so on. And whenever we challenged the local authorities to explain why there are no services in their settlements, the new urban settlements, they always talk about sanctions, in the sense that they are not able to borrow. Because for them to borrow, they need government to guarantee that borrowing. So when they conduct government says we are unable to guarantee that borrowing as a result of sanctions. However, I'm here to extend our hands as the academia. If I present myself as representing the academia, you might think these are philosophers. They're just philosophical in their teaching and so forth and so on. But probably I should say that we are researchers. That's our role. We are creators of new knowledge. We generate new knowledge. And I'm here to extend partnership to this initiative. Wherever initiatives of this nature are launched, internationally or nationally, those who are running them must be very clear as to the issues they are dealing with. We must be very clear as to what this data is. I won't go into that because it has been eloquently explained here. They must be very clear of the type and nature of sanctions. Not only that, they must also be very clear as to whether those sanctions actually exist in this country. If I put a question to you to say, do sanctions exist in this country? You would say yes. If I challenge you to show me evidence, you have none. So as academia, we groan if we come across people that have a good idea, a brilliant idea, but that idea at some point lacks the evidence. That's where we come in and offer our services. We look for the V11 forms for you. That's what we do. We know information resides in the people. It resides in those who have been affected by sanctions. And another speaker here said, we are all not affected by sanctions. We are in ties, we are in African attire, and so forth and so on. But people out there, businesses, and an ordinary person out there, they know how they've been affected by sanctions. So I'm glad to tell you that some 2 years ago, the government of Zimbabwe commissioned the University of Zimbabwe to conduct research on the socio-economic impact of sanctions in Zimbabwe. So in that sense, probably you have to look at government as a partner in this process, not as a competitor. If you rope them in, rope government as a partner. And that job was given to the University of Zimbabwe, and the process that followed was that each and every faculty in that university came up with a report, a sectorial report. You are looking at trade and industry, you are looking at commerce, you are looking at agriculture, you are looking at tourism, you are looking at finance, trade, and so forth and so on. I was looking at the legal aspects of it. So there's a report that is coming out. It's not yet done so far, but there's a report that is coming out, And the report was done in such a way that the researchers went out there to speak to the people. Not to be told as whether sanctions exist or they don't. They went further than that to inquire into the impact those sanctions have had on ordinary people in this country. And I have no doubt whatsoever that when that research comes out, there will be an opportunity for me and my colleagues even to come to this meeting, and each and every one of us will present statistics, evidence on the ground that shows the socio-economic impact of sanctions. In conclusion, let me repeat what two or so speakers have said here, that as an initiative, as a campaign, we need to be objective. As researchers are objective. We go into the people, speak to them, what we find, we analyze it, and present it in its original state. Some of the basis of sanctions that we have, if you look at the most of them, is a governance issue. And governance is a very broad issue. It's a very broad concept. But there are certain aspects that we as the church and other stakeholders in this initiative should be able to assist our government to accomplish. You know that the DARA was amended in May 2018, recently. And it introduced new conditions. Further